on average, say 4%, just above the population growth. But if you look at the remote areas, especially say for example northwest to north and probably the northeast, the population growth is over 4.55%. Agricultural growth rate is 4%. So basically they are not benefiting at all. And if you look at if you believe in the HBS numbers and take the below 40%, per capita income remains same. It is zero growth altogether. Now, one reason we have been looking at is why this is so. There are one, among others, there could be two reasons. One is fertilizer and seeds. Now, there is a scheme funded by the World Bank which provides subsidy for fertilizer and seeds. But that covers only 1/3 of the farmers. That means 2/3 of the farmers are left out of that system. Now what happens to the rest? They cannot qualify because there is no 50% contribution from themselves to qualify for the other 50% from the government. And also, interestingly, they don't have any other alternative mechanism to find that 50%. So ultimately they end up, say, getting or selling their rights to get the fertilizer subsidy to someone else who may be, say, doing something else other than the subsistence crops.
In the sugar cane, which you have also mentioned, where we have outgrowers, and some processors pay good price for the cane. They've entered a long-term contract with farmers, therefore they are assured of purchase of their produce. But that alone is not guaranteed, has not made the farmers switch from, say, rice and spend their labor time, efforts, and inputs in producing a larger quantity of cane. So you also see a mix there where you see here farmers are growing cane, here farmers are growing rice. These farmers are starting to grow their cane late, others come. And therefore, even coordinating the harvesting itself becomes very inefficient because you have to skip, you have to travel over a large geographical distance to follow 2 or 3 plots of cane. So you need some coordinating mechanisms. And I don't know whether you are suggesting the market institutions can take this coordinating role, which is a bit difficult in my opinion. Thirdly, you mentioned about the World Bank's change of heart. And one of the points we are raising here is that the economists during the 80s and 90s were suggesting that agriculture is not a does not have a comparative advantage in agriculture. But when you look at the stance of the World Bank then, drawing largely from the report by Beck in 1981, it apparently says, well, Tanzania still has a comparative advantage in agriculture and therefore it should stay in agriculture.
As you say, it started with a short list of issues that they were proposing. In the end, they chose very few to suit the interests of those who are promoting Kilimo Kwanza. I think we need to have this kind of political economy analysis so that we can really understand Kilimo Kwanza.
And I'd like to pick up on the last point about the so-called policy of Kilimo Kwanza. On page 5 of your paper, if I understand what you're saying, you're arguing that it isn't true that Kilimo Kwanza is primarily about channeling money to large farms. But I think we really need to go beyond the text. And even those who took part in preparing it, there may very well be participants who conceived of this as something that's supposed to be both sides. It's supposed to be promoting both small-scale and large-scale production. But if we look at the politics of what's going on, as well as what kind of investments, like if you go back and look at the budget, this present budget, the kind of tax reliefs that were given for organized farming, it's clearly for large-scale farmers, in the name of Kilimo Kwanza. And again, if we connect it to the kind of major investments now going on in Tanzania for large-scale farmers, I think it would also be, it's very great that you're referring to Monsanto, but we need to link all these things up to what's happening, if not in Tanzania, also elsewhere, and learn, like Jean Koopman's done recent research in Senegal, and she's been looking at the history of Agra and the MCC, the Millennium Challenge Corporation. And of course, Agra is the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. Agra is based upon the idea of developing GMs, genetically modified seeds, and the package with fertilizer, insecticides, and so on, right? And the Millennium Corporation with them is promoting the idea of land liberalization. The outcome of this in the last 2 years of Agra and this Senegal River Valley was that small-scale farmers couldn't keep up. They had used their land as collateral for loans, changes of pricing mechanisms and stuff like that. And who bought up the land? Of course, it's the big investors. Because the big investors have economies of scale. They can handle things in a different way. It's not because they're necessarily more efficient and productive and so on. As you correctly say, you're implying in your own paper that small may also be beautiful in certain kind of context. And there's no mention here of labor, and yet this is proven to be a major constraint for small-scale farming, and I think not just in Tanzania, is the question of labor force. The decline you referred to in the earlier period of time, in terms of prices for export crops and so on, some of the empirical work that has been done by people looking at gender and class in agriculture in Tanzania has also been able to document major resistance of unpaid laborers in peasant economy. They're just refusing to work, and you can do it go slow, or you can spend your time producing other kinds of crops for which you do control, such as food. And this is, of course, the resistance of women as well as young people to working as unpaid labor. So the whole question about the organization of the labor process in order to understand peasant economy and the significance of who is actually the producer on the ground, and are they prepared to continue working as slaves, unpaid labor? And what we have seen the last 2 or 3 decades is they are not. So it is time to pay attention. It's not just about, oh, those are those women talking, da, da, da. No. This is about how peasant economy is organized.
In its present form, it's open to massive misuse of funds without any answer. Now, I'd like to talk more about contradictions that are existing in agriculture, but which are increasing many folds now. The Tanzanian sisal industry was one of the best in the world. It even produced a hybrid on its own. The Mboni group, the Karimji group, the Rayleigh group, etc. And when smallholders came, there were many problems. But unknown to most people, you had close to 11,000 tons of sisal being produced just as hedge sisal. Sukuma laborers going back and having hedges to keep up the cattle, and that became your sisal industry. And the rope was used just locally, etc. So it had some multiplier effect, which we did not quite realize. Why am I bringing the sisal industry? It is in a total decline because somehow or the other, because people sitting up there were making all sorts of promises. There is very little sisal actually being grown in Tanzania. So all this talk about you can produce biofuels and so on is nonsense. You spend close to $9 million just to produce 6 megawatts of power. My goodness me, you could actually build a small dam, a couple of small dams, and actually produce electricity for a community, as being done in Jombe. Okay? But we have this grandiose plan, these huge sisal estates. If we don't watch out, Tanzania will become a major banana republic in Africa. Okay? Why am I saying that? What do you do with all the, in a very efficient way, all you require is 2 or 3 large American firms to come here. And you can grow all the food that you want and even export it. So what do you do with the surplus labor? That's the big question. You talked about liberalized maize market. Go and tell that to the people in Rukwa. Nearly 1 million bags were rotting. But you know what we've done? We haven't learned. 140,000 hectares of land in Panda and in Rukwa going for this huge scheme with the Americans. What is going to be grown there? Maize? Rice? Biofuels? I don't know. But that's a surplus growing area. Isn't it a joke? Tanzania is the 4th largest producer of paddy. Was it done through large-scale farming? Answer. Now, Likwelele has produced an excellent study on irrigation farming. Okay? And it's comparing the Kipunga with the Lower Moshi. I happen to know Lower Moshi because we did a study about 25, 30 years ago. One of the most amazing things about Lower Moshi is that you figure 0.3 of a hectare. The Japanese insisted that they did not want large-scale farms. They wanted small-scale farms. So it's written in 0.3 of a hectare. Number one, just like in Japan, they're not big farms. I visited Lower Moshi 30 years later, in November. I was astonished at the change. The houses were well done. The multiplier effect, people selling chef over to the people in the highlands, keeping great cattle down, sending the children to school, shops, improved housing. To me, that is development. And in contrast, and that is what Likwelele was describing, in contrast to what is happening in Kipunga. So in fact, there are so many contradictions that we've got to sort out. In fact, we shouldn't think of this as just, some politicians deciding it. I got an email saying, tonight there'll be a program on genetically modified crops. So by the time I read the mail, the show had already started. So I got the tail end of it.